Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to the IBC webinar on plastics. It's one of a series that we're doing under the Green Transitions Training Program. We've had sustainable finance, energy, circular economy. Plastics is the penultimate one, and will be followed by enabling policies and strategic frameworks. You'll hear more about this after my introductory remarks. I think the first thing that hit me this week was actually in relation to COP27, where I heard that plastics is plan B for the oil and the petroleum companies or sector, which is deeply concerning and deeply worrying. However, let's focus on today. So today we're going to hear about a new treaty on plastic pollution. We're also going to hear about the solution space, circularity, and also green jobs. But most importantly, what we'll do today is share our experiences, learn from each other, both within Europe and also from colleagues outside of Europe who are doing the same kind of processes, fulfilling the same kind of roles as ourselves. So we have a packed agenda, some very talented and interesting speakers that will present plastics in terms of the problems it causes, but also plastics in terms of the solutions. So the objective of this webinar is really to gain an understanding of the policy context and the approaches to addressing plastic pollution and the role that the UNCTs can play on the ground to help countries in relation to this environmental topic. I think there'll be an opportunity, or there will be an opportunity, for questions and answers and relevant experience sharing between the panelists, between the participants, all of our colleagues across the UN and beyond. I think my final point is a guidance document which has been produced for each of the preceding webinars, will be released shortly after this webinar. It will take on board some of the discussions. It will be developed. This document will be a resource for UN country teams and resident coordinators' offices moving forward. So with that, I would like to again welcome you all to the webinar on plastics. I hope you enjoy this. I hope you learn from this, and I hope you can share also with other colleagues. And now I'd like to pass over to Livia Bizikova from the International Institute of Sustainable Development, who are coordinating the facilitation and moderation of these series of webinars. Livia, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon. My name is Livia Bizikova, and I am a lead at the International Institute for Sustainable Development, IISD. And I'm here with two of my colleagues, Darren Swanson and Leslie Pass, who will be assisting during this webinar. As Matt mentioned, our primary role is to help facilitate the webinar to run it smoothly. And also during the webinar, there will be few specific places to interact through putting your insights into specific tools and also using questions and quizzes, and that will be also managed by us. As Matt mentioned, this is the webinar number 4, which focuses on plastic. We already obviously had 3 before, and there is 1 to go, which is on enabling policies. All the webinars had a similar structure, and the structure compiles of, next slide, please, two kind of sections for the webinar. The first one focuses on presentations, and then the second one focuses on a plenary panel. During the presentation, as Matt said, we will focus on regulatory framework as well as the linkages between plastics and circular economy. After this session, there will be a specific space for you to insert your question or ask your questions, as well as there will be a quiz. And then after this session, we will have a next session, which is a plenary panel, where we have 4 experts that will talk about very specific aspects of managing plastics and share practical experiences. And this is also, as a plenary panel, there will be a space for your questions, and And I'm hoping that we will get some interesting practical insights from the panelists. Then there will be a short closing of the event. And as Matt mentioned, the event will be followed up with a guidance document that kind of summarizes in writing the major outcomes and key messages of the event. So now I'm handing over to my colleague Darren Swanson to talk about how the interactive parts of the event will be managed. Darren?
Thank you, Livia, and thank you, Matt. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. As was mentioned, this will be an interactive webinar here today, and we're going to give you lots of opportunities to share and ask questions. But maybe the first order of business for everybody is to rename yourself in the participant list. If you haven't done so already, you can just click, if you go to the participants part of the menu and find your name, and then hovering over to the right, if you haven't done this before, there's 3 dots that'll allow you to rename yourself. And if you could maybe put the country office that you are in and also your agency in brackets, and that will allow your peers on the webinar here today to know who and where you're from, and that will help with the interaction throughout the next few hours. If you have any difficulty with that renaming, you can send a direct chat even to Leslie, and she'll be able to help you out. So that will be the first part to help us interact as a group here today. The next piece that will help us to interact is a virtual sharing board that we have set up using the app Padlet. And you will see there on the right is a barcode and also a link. So if you do have your mobile device handy and you want to participate in the sharing board that way, you can scan the barcode with your camera and just holding your camera up to the barcode, and it should take you right to the page. If not, if you're on a laptop, you can open a separate internet browser and put in that link there. Leslie will copy that link to the chat space here in Zoom. Now, this discussion space is a place for you to add examples of where you have addressed plastics in your country programming, to share challenges and lessons learned, to share what types of supports you would need going forward in terms of programming and strategic direction, and as well at the far right, a space for other information. All you need to do is click on the plus sign, and you can add text, a title, you can add additional text, you can add a link to a report or to a video, and that will be our space for sharing, and it'll be open following the event as well. And this will be included as summarized in a meeting report as well. So this is a very important space for sharing information throughout the webinar. Okay, now also what we're going to do, we're going to have a number of polls and quizzes. I think we're all quite used to this now in our virtual meeting space and our participation. We're going to be using the app slido.com, and we're going to give you a barcode in a moment here to participate in these. And so without, I guess, let's learn by doing is the best way to do all of this. So let's try a first poll here for the day. Just a little bit of a quiz to set the context for this, this plastics webinar. So on the screen, we got the first question here for you to address. And you have a barcode similar to the Padlet app here. If you just scan your camera, if you have your mobile device handy, if you can scan that, hold your camera up to the barcode, this will take you right to the poll. And if you don't, if you have your laptop, you can go to slido.com in an internet browser, and you put in the code IBC green. And that will take you right to the poll space, and these will advance throughout the webinar here today. So you'll have a couple of things open at once to help us interact throughout the day, and Leslie had just put that link in the chat space as well. So we're slowly getting some participation on this question. So the question is, globally, how many plastic bags are used annually? We got a number of choices here to set the context for this event. And these questions come courteous of a UN Environment Program website on interesting facts regarding plastics. give people a chance to respond to this, and let's take a look at what people are thinking so far. All right, a lot of different answers because there was a lot of different options. And indeed, the correct answer to how many plastic bags are used annually in the world is 5 trillion. It's kind of a remarkable statistic that really sets the tone here for today for why we have to have a conversation and talk programmatically and strategically about addressing plastics and green transitions. Okay, so I think everyone's getting a handle on the Slido. If you're having some difficulties, you could send Leslie a chat message. Let's have just one more for some additional practice. One more question too on plastics to set the stage. Again, globally, how many plastic bottles are purchased every single minute? All right, every single minute, how many plastic bottles are purchased? And we have some choices here from 100,000 to 50,000 bottles to 1 million bottles. All right, give you a chance to respond a bit. Again, these questions here really do set the stage. And I think Matt also set the stage when in his opening remarks. All right, let's take a quick look. See how everybody's doing. Yes, I think, we got a range of responses, but indeed the answer is, the statistic is that there's 1 million plastic bottles are purchased every single minute in the world. It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it, and that sort of just basically says why we're here. All right, so I think everyone's got a handle on the Slido. We'll come back to another Slido a little bit later after the presentations. And so without further ado, we are going to, I'll hand it back over to Livia to introduce our speakers for today, and then I'll see you again in a little while with some question and answers after we've introduced the speakers. And just one more sort of house cleaning note. We will have a Q&A session after our opening presenters. And so if you do have questions for our speakers, please do put your questions in the chat space. And we will come back to those during the Q&A session. And also presenters too, if you see questions that in the chat space that you think are answerable in a tweet-like fashion, please do go ahead and interact with the participants directly. So over to you, Livia.
Thank you. And thank you for all of you for participating in the polls. We will have a few more. And as Darren said, feel free to ask questions or share your experience project on the sharing board. So in this session, this part of the event will focus on 2 presentations. So we will look at the presentation on plastic pollution and the regulatory framework and the role of the UN organizations in this process. These presentations will be done by Brenda Koek, Program Manager at UNEP, Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee Secretariat on Plastics. And then we will look at the linkages between the plastic and the circular economy. And we already had the webinar on circular economy, so it will be really interesting to hear about the linkages specifically from the plastic side. And this will be done by Lorek Mila Canals, a lead of the Life Cycle Initiative at the Economic Division at UNEP. So first over to Brenda.
All right, Brenda, I've stopped share. You can now share your screen with your slides. And again, just a reminder as Brenda's getting set up for participants, if you do have questions, to just queue them up in the chat space, and we'll be paying attention to those throughout and coming back to a Q&A at the end. All right, I think we can see your presentation now, Brenda.
Excellent.
And then maybe just into presentation mode and you're set to go.
Okay, I'm trying to put it in presentation mode. There we go. Excellent. You can see it okay?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thanks very much for inviting me today. This is a great opportunity to give an introduction in the UN country team context, and from our perspective, a very encouraging space for cooperation and coordination across the system. So today I'll present on plastic pollution as an environmental challenge, but I will, as mentioned, focus on the status of the development of the international legally binding instrument that was agreed to at UNEA 5.2 earlier this year. And I think it's important to note that at every United Nations Environment Assembly since 2014, governments have taken decisions on marine litter and microplastics, as well as other various resolutions linked to it over time. And it really demonstrates the high level of interest in this topic and how it's evolved over time to now into an agreement for an internationally legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. And of course, we are seeing political messaging everywhere, and it's an important opportunity to move forward. I just wanted to start here with a little story about the TAP. And this is pictured on the UN campus in Nairobi. And it is pictured from UNEA 5.2 held earlier this year, where the historic decision on plastic pollution was taken. So it's a giant tap made of plastic waste sourced from Kibera, which is described as the largest slum in Africa. And the installation was created by an international artist and activist, Benjamin Van Wong. So it's actually 30 feet tall, the installation, and it was assisted, the creation of it was assisted by the Human Needs Project, which is a local NGO providing essential services and opportunities to people living in harsh conditions. So the build out of the installation provided temporary jobs for 100 residents from the community, and it's located just 10 miles from the Gigiri campus of UNEP. So the plastics were sourced from the informal waste sector, sanitized and tied together before bringing to the fields of the UN. And this tap has just been a big source of inspiration. Many photos were taken of it during the session by international media. And I just wanted to highlight it in getting started because it really shows the power of local and civil society messaging to inspire action. And we really count on these types of local demonstrations to show the extent of the problem, but also the value of cooperation globally. So in terms of looking across the life cycle, what is really the issue? I think there's a lot of statistics out there. I just wanted to point a couple things out. The production and consumption of plastic, as we all know in our personal lives, has grown exponentially since the 1950s, and it is set to triple by 2060 if business continues as usual. So this makes the treaty process extremely important. Today, it's estimated about 400 million tons of plastic are estimated to be produced annually. Plastic production is associated with the use of chemical additives, many of which are concerns for human and environmental health. Some are listed already under the Stockholm Convention, and others may be listed in various national legislations. Producers and consumers around the world are connected through international supply chains and through international trade and investment that occurs across this life cycle of plastic. So it's a very complex and interconnected network all the way to the end of life across the spectrum. So the solutions to the plastic crisis must take place along this life cycle and involve a number of stakeholders and actors. And that's why it's really helpful for us to see a various set of stakeholders from across the UN community here involved in this session today. Lawrence, of course, is going to talk much further about solutions and apply his expertise to that, but I just wanted to start by showing a simple perception of the life cycle. So what happened at the Environment Assembly, UNEP's annual meeting of member states? Decision 514 was adopted, and it requests UNEP to convene an intergovernmental negotiating committee to develop an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. The resolution specifies that the instrument's to be based on a comprehensive approach that addresses the full life cycle of plastic and to take into account national circumstances and the Rio Declaration. We are aiming to have to complete the negotiation initiation of this process by the end of 2024. And we are initiating the first intergovernmental negotiating committee at the end of November in Punta del Este, Uruguay. The process has already kicked off. We had an ad hoc open-ended working group in Senegal in March 2022, and it has helped set the stage and the rules of engagement at the upcoming meeting. I think it's important just to specify here to you what types of initiatives will the instrument consider. So paragraph 3 of our UNEA resolution specifies a series of important things to be looking at across the life cycle of plastic, including resource efficiency and circular economy approaches, but also to be looking at capacity building, technologies, technical and financial assistance, looking at compliance, national action plans, research and innovation, scientific and socioeconomic info and assessments, data, monitoring, reporting, as well as stakeholder engagement, cooperation, and coordination at all levels. So these are things that are rather common across many multilateral environmental agreement spaces, but I think it's quite important that we think about national context as well as learning from existing agreements of where we can do better. I heard Matt mention in his introduction COP27, and I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned from that process. The resolution also specifies in paragraph 4 how will the instrument deliver, and mentions a series of things, including lessons learning and best practices, which I just mentioned, but looking at technical and financial assistance, national circumstances, mechanisms for policy relevant scientific and socioeconomic informations and assessment. And I think these elements are very important. We need to be looking at how we build from others and what can we learn from community spaces at national and local level. I just wanted to specify that we have a series of documents already available, of course, to our meeting participants, because the meeting starts on the 28th of November for our first negotiating session. And one of them is the clustering of elements for consideration for the future agreement. Now, this diagram is rather large and complex, but I think it's an important thing to be looking at how some of these elements are clustered in considering what may be the impact at national level. Many of these aspects are can be kind of standard across environmental agreements, such as the introductory elements, preambles, and final provisions. So they may include things linking to human health or human rights. But some of them are going to be very specific to national implementation. And I highlighted 2 of the boxes in blue, particularly implementation measures, looking at national action plans, national reporting and compliance, for example, as well as the blue box on other. So that includes things like stakeholder engagement, awareness raising, and assessments, all of which are also quite important at national level. The third gray box, core obligations, control measures, and voluntary approaches, of course, will lay a lot of the groundwork on how what the obligations are in the treaty to meet its overall objective. And I think the presentation you'll hear from Lawrence will start to outline some of the possibilities in that area. So these topics are, of course, still to be negotiated by stakeholders, but this is how we as an INC Secretariat have first qualified looking at paragraphs 3 and 4 of our UNEA resolution and how this could be organized into a global agreement. So certainly all of these aspects are very interesting at a country level and are a space where the UN and its overall support mechanisms can support countries to implement a future treaty, but also learn from their neighbors in how to do things better. I wanted to just touch on what under the first blue box, implementation measures, I have an acronym there of NAPs, which we are referring to national action plans as an example. So a treaty may require something like a national action plan to be developed at national level as a core piece of implementation, similar to what is done under climate change. I think these are key aspects to look at how treaties are implemented at national level and how stakeholders are engaged in setting out the national objectives. I thought today was a really interesting opportunity for experience sharing, especially on this type of topic. So, what could be learned from other processes? How can we build on ongoing actions and other processes? And how could national action plans support regional and international cooperation? I just wanted to touch on the timeline for our INC process, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, just to be a bit more specific here in what's ahead. Some of you may be hearing about it at national levels. We do have national focal points identified from most countries at this stage for the INC process. And as I mentioned, our first negotiating committee is coming up. It is scheduled for the 28th of November in Punta del Este, Uruguay. We do expect that these 5 negotiating sessions will be rotated around the world. We have indication that the second negotiating session will be likely held in France in April or May 2023. There are a number of interesting aspects associated with INC1. There will be regional meetings scheduled on the 27th of November, and there will also be a multi-stakeholder forum scheduled on the 26th of November to boost stakeholder engagement in our process. There are important stakeholders across the life cycle of plastic and on many topics related to different types of plastics and different uses of plastics, of course. Lawrence is very involved in the stakeholder forum, so again, you'll hear from him on that. You'll see our timeline is very ambitious to conclude INC5 by October or November 2024. So by the end of 2024, this is sort of unprecedented in global negotiating processes, but has been the direction we have been set by our UNEA resolution. And I think it indicates the seriousness of the problem and how important it is to member states. Finally, I just wanted to highlight a document we've prepared for Uruguay, which is document 10, and it's provides options for promoting cooperation and coordination, particularly on plastics. And there is a section of the document that looks at how some aspects linking to the UN system. The full meeting document is on our website, and when I finish my presentation, I'll just drop the link in so that you have it. But there are a number of things listed here that I think are rather interesting and where we could learn from each other. So I'd be very interested to hear your perspectives on these elements. But on options that we could cooperate on could be looking at harmonizing monitoring and reporting across the life cycle, working with the resident coordinators to mainstream the identification of plastic hotspots into country analysis and plastics governance in cooperation frameworks. And this is a space that could be extremely interesting and effective. Working with regional mechanisms to develop regional baselines and corresponding action plans, and then working thematically with different areas into drawing resources and maybe looking at other aspects that are also important, such as trade, health, human rights, etc. So these are really important aspects. And at the end of the day, I think we really want to aim for a treaty with impact and looking at how we can work together most effectively and where each of our value addeds are strongest. I think we can do better. So I would just challenge us to have this type of discussion today where we see our different agencies could add value into this process. So that's my introduction to this. We have this resolution at this stage. We also have political, industry, community momentum like never before. So as a global process, I think it's really important to take the global level down to our national level. And I think UN country teams can really play a supportive role in this green transition at national level. So I really look forward to the experience sharing opportunities we may have today and happy to take any questions or further from you. Thank you.
Thank you. No, go ahead, Darren.
Thank you very much, Brenda. And I think whilst we're waiting here, we can now queue up, Lawrence could share your screen now. But just participants just to note that questions in the chat space, you can put them in there, and Brenda will pay attention to that also during the next the coming minutes. And just as a brief check-in here while Lawrence is getting set up, that we do the virtual chat space here right now is we see that participants are adding info to this site, examples of addressing plastics, challenges that we're experiencing in addressing plastics, and also other general info, statistics, and the like. So I can encourage you, you can put them in the chat space in Zoom as well, but then please do go, you can go to the virtual discussion board here at Padlet. Link will be in the chat space, and that is additional space for you to share information and issues. So without further ado, I think we'll have a Q&A session right at the very end. So Brenda, do stay tuned. But I think at this point, right now, over to you, Lawrence.
Thank you so much, Darren, and yeah, thanks for the invitation. Brenda already provided all the background on what I will be presenting, but we will be talking a lot about plastics and circular economy. But actually, I'll base all of the presentation on one of these documents that Brenda mentioned has been prepared for the first meeting of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. And the link that we just shared, you can find this document there as well. It's the one on the plastic science. But I'll focus much more on the science and the solutions that we know from the science, rather than the problems that are also very important. But I guess also Brenda went a bit over those. So I have quite a long presentation. I'll strive to touch upon everything, but yeah, I mean, also bear with me if I have to go a bit fast. These are the sections of the document that I refer to, and I'll briefly go through all of them. Although the first one, the summary, we'll put it in the end. So so hopefully the key points stick a bit further with you. So very briefly, we'll go first through some elements on the background of what we know about the trends in plastic production, where the pollution is occurring, the impacts from this pollution, and then we'll move quickly towards the solutions and technologies and how, I mean, what does science tell us about these solutions and technologies. So as Brenda already mentioned, I mean, the production of plastics has been skyrocketing in the last decades, particularly since the introduction, their introduction in the 1950s. We've seen the production really rocket, and indeed it's forecast to triple from now to 2060. The production, as you can see, I mean, the main regions producing plastic in the world are in the pie chart in the middle. But importantly as well, the consumption of plastics is also very varied. So the consumption per capita of plastic is really high in high-income countries, and well, much lower. So it's probably 2 or 3 times lower in lower income countries or middle income countries. So that's in terms of the production. We know, and Brenda also mentioned, it's not just the plastic, the actual polymers that we're talking about. There's a huge diversity of chemical substances which are added to the polymers, many times added on purpose to provide the plastics with different properties, but also sometimes they are the result of byproducts or contamination that goes into the plastics. We see here over 10,000 different chemical products are identified, of which about a quarter have been identified as of potential concern to human health and safety. You also see a screenshot here of another document, an information document that will be posted in the same website shortly, which actually provides much more information about the chemicals in plastics and what we know about them. And actually, there's already an update that it's over 13,000 unique chemicals that we're talking about. But it's important to consider that when we're talking plastics, we're talking actually of a much broader issue. In this slide here, we're providing a bit more detail of some of the elements around production. So actually, let me use the pointer so it's easier. This bar chart at the top tells us the main sectors that are consuming plastic. And you see the first part, which is packaging. That's where the majority, over 40% of the plastic production globally goes to this sector. And the issue, of course, with packaging is that it's one of the sectors where plastic is used for the shortest period, and very, very quickly all this plastic becomes waste. Whereas in other sectors like textile, but mainly also in buildings and construction or mobility, a lot of plastic, actually plastic is used everywhere in every sector, but most of this other plastic is used for more durable products. So it obviously ends up as waste eventually, but it takes much longer. It accumulates in the economy for a longer time. It's interesting to know as well from the waste production point of view what's happening with plastic waste, and we see that actually the vast majority today it's either landfilled, not always in sanitary landfills, as we might know in some countries. Many times these are just dump sites, which could also be considered as the entry door to the environment because they accumulate in these dump sites, but then they leak and enter into rivers or enter into terrestrial ecosystems. Part of it is incinerated, and only a small proportion is being recycled. So that's in this figure of 10%, it's usually actually a bit less than 10%. This is the result of rounding up the figures, but more around between 9 and 10% of the plastic is being recycled. We see already about a third that ends up in the environment. So of course this is where what is causing the concern. And this diagram here, please bear with me, it's a bit more complicated or complex. It depicts the flow of plastics in the economy from the plastic production and where it's coming from. So 99% of the plastics, over 99% actually, of the plastic that we have entering in the market, the virgin plastic that comes into the market is from fossil fuels, so oil and gas. And Matt was mentioning in the beginning that plastics are being seen as a plan B for the oil and gas. Well, it could well be. There is a very small proportion of plastics which are being produced from biomass, so what we call bio-based plastics. But interestingly as well, we see that only this tiny proportion of plastics are being circulated from plastics that had been already used. So this upper loop here, this is what we could consider the plastic that is being circulated and kept in the economy. In terms of plastic use, again, the distribution by the different sectors that are using most of the plastic, and then what happens with plastic waste. So it's in a way the different way of putting all this information that I had been sharing until now, with the added information of where plastic is ending up in the environment. So the amount of plastic that is mismanaged and littered and ends up leaking into the environment, we see where it accumulates in dump sites or in the sea, in rivers, in lakes, etc. As I said, I mean, we're going very, very fast on all of these elements, but it's just to provide some ideas that all the details are in the document that I mentioned. And then in terms of the plastic pollution that is getting into the environment, we see the majority of plastic in terms of volume is macroplastic. So that's pieces of plastic which are bigger than 5 millimeters. So essentially the plastic that you can quickly see. And this can be actually up to the level of meters when we see a fishing gear, for instance, that is lost in the environment, or centimeters, etc. But this is the big pieces of plastic, and then microplastics, which are mostly generated in the environment already. So what we call the secondary microplastics, that's plastic that breaks down once it's in the environment and then becomes these small pieces that can be that can enter the food chain and generate many other types of problems. And here we see also what a working definition of plastic pollution could be also in the document. Here I'm just listing some of the impacts that plastic pollution generates on human health. And again, we don't have the time to go into the details of all of these. We could have one presentation for each one of these elements, but from the perspective of human health, there are increasing references that are talking about these potential impacts. sometimes not potential impacts that have already been proven. Some of them associated with the chemical additives, associated as well with a disease that can be transmitted by plastic. We see, for instance, a lot of the problems from plastic as well, blocking drains and generating breeding grounds for mosquitoes, and therefore being also vector for other diseases, or generating floods, killing people directly from the floods, as we have seen in several recent events. So again, there is the component of how plastic pollution is also aggravating the impacts from climate change because of all these kind of links with influencing the water cycling, etc. There's also many impacts on the environment and environmental quality that we can talk for hours about. So obviously what we see is the direct impacts on affecting species with lethal and sublethal effects, species that ingest plastic or that get entangled in plastic and can die or reduce their life expectancy. But there's many other impacts certainly around, for instance, the toxicity of some substances related to plastics. The plastic life cycle is also associated with ozone depletion because of the use of certain ozone depleting substances in the manufacture of specific polymers. Definitely climate change. Again, plastics are essentially fossil fuels that we are transforming. So greenhouse gas emissions along the life cycle of plastics are very important. And if the trend continues in terms of the production boom in plastics, by depending on the calculations, but the plastics could represent 15 or 19% of the global carbon budget if we are to stay within a 1.5 degree scenario, which seems increasingly likely. Plastics also have direct effect on the global carbon cycling and potential radiative forcing. But again, I'm just briefly touching on the many different impacts, but don't have much time to go into them. Finally, also in terms of socioeconomic impacts, there's millions of people touched by plastics, people that depend on plastic somehow, but also people that are impacted negatively through the impact related to plastic production. So again, sorry for all the rush. In terms of what we've pulled together on the monitoring and reporting and the needs for additional knowledge, well, there's certainly a lot of knowledge that we already have and that allows us to act today. We know the kind of things that we need to do, but there's still many things that we don't know. And of course, we need to continue improving this knowledge, and particularly to understand where plastic is being used, how plastic is leaking into the environment, where is it causing impacts on health. So moving now more towards the side of the solutions, and as Brenda said, so the solutions need to be along the full life cycle of plastic products. And here, I mean, there's a couple of important definitions that or concepts that are included in the resolution 514 that Brenda referred to. And importantly, this resolution is insisting on the importance of considering the full life cycle of products, but also of looking into much more resource efficient and circular economy solutions. So what we're doing in this slide is essentially to bring home, hopefully, a clear definition of what the life cycle means. And we saw that diagram in Brenda's presentation, so with a bit more description, graphical description. But this is essentially the same, where we're depicting the life cycle, showing that in the life cycle, we start, or the life cycle is the compilation of the life cycle stages, compilation of the stages through which one product goes, from the extraction of raw materials and their processing. So raw materials, in the case of plastic, we're talking oil and gas, essentially, their conversion, their manufacturing into products, into polymers, the production of products, or the manufacture of actual products that use plastic, the distribution of these products, use and consumption. Potentially, they can be kept being reused, and then eventually the plastic products becoming waste. And here we have obviously several options in what would be a linear economy. This waste is essentially just disposed. So with this concept of the linear economy being the take, make, dispose, and then that's just a line. or we can actually recycle materials back and keep them in the economy. So coming to a circular economy, and then, well, talking more of a life cycle. So hopefully that's clear in the document. Apologies, now I'm having trouble to change the slide. There we go. In the document, we're also distinguishing these broad clusters of life cycle stages. So the upstream, essentially in the production of materials, the midstream, where we are working with materials and where materials could be kept within the economy. And finally, the downstream, where, again, materials can be recycled and brought back into the economy. Going back to this diagram, or the flow diagram of how plastics are moving through the economy, we identify four main strategic goals, as we call them, the four main strategies to shift the linear economy from plastics towards a circular economy and to address plastic pollution more generally. Firstly, and we're putting this at the upstream, so when we're talking about the plastic manufacture, we see that there is a huge need to reduce the size of the problem. And we can reduce the size of the problem by shifting to more circular ways of using products. For instance, reuse, which is important. So replacing single-use plastic products by reusable ones means that we keep these reusable products within the economy. We don't need so much material going in. Or simply also eliminating problematic and unnecessary products. So that's the first strategic goal. Second one is to design things so they stay in the economy. So what we call circularity by design, innovating in the types of products that we're using. So they are actually designed to either be reused within the economy, or they are also designed to be easily circulated at the end of their lives. At the moment, we have many products that are very, very hard to recycle, simply because they have not been designed to be recycled. They have been designed to simply be chucked away and ending up in a landfill, or worst, the environment. So this third strategic goal is about ensuring that circularity happens in practice. So circularity by design, circularity in practice. And then eventually, we obviously need to still consider in this fourth strategic goal, what happens with the rest? What happens with the materials that are perhaps less circular or not circular? They are still not designed, but we have to find ways, we have to ensure that they do not leak into the environment. So stopping them and dealing with them adequately so they don't get into the environment. I'm conscious of time, and we'll have to press on, but I just wanted to show some examples of these strategic goals. You will have, as Brenda was mentioning, we have many more examples of what kinds of measures, policies, tools could be used in the agreement, in the international legally binding agreement, to bring these strategic goals to bear. So in the first one, on reducing the size of the problem, here we're talking a lot, for instance, about bans, potential economic instruments to reduce the consumption of virgin material, or to get money or translate more the actual price of plastic, so we can actually use part of that of the money captured, for instance, in taxes or levies, to finance the infrastructure that is required to keep this plastic in the economy and out of the environment. So just some examples there. It can be also about removing and eliminating unnecessary plastic products. We see a lot of over-dimensioning with packaging, many packaging that is really not required. I mean, fruit is perfectly packaged, most of it by nature. Why do we have to still wrap it up, etc.? So many examples there. The second one, circularity by design. So here we have also many options in terms of ensuring standards, design guidelines, ensuring that those products that are designed to be in the economy are designed to stay as well in the economy. The circularity in practice, and here we're talking a lot about how to ensure that we close the loop. So we keep all the material within the economy by having the necessary infrastructure to collect the waste and to address it, to manage it, and to bring it back into the economy before it actually becomes waste. And then finally, as mentioned, this fourth strategic goal, where we still have to deal with the plastic products that are already in the environment and its existing pollution, or plastic products that will still be designed for some years and will enter in the economy without being thought to be circular. So we still have to deal with these products, and that's also the fourth strategic goal, to ensure that they don't get into the environment. And here we include as well elements such as prevent the introduction of microplastics, or capture the microplastics that are being created, ensuring that trade is used in the right way. So ensuring that, for instance, plastic waste is not traded to countries that don't have the capacity to deal with it, etc. And mentioning trade, this is an extremely important element. So here's just some figures. In 2018, trade of plastic products in all forms, and that includes primary plastic products, so kind of the building blocks for plastics, or even the plastic pellets, the initial polymers, or intermediate plastic products that are going to be used for something else, or finished plastic products like the plastic that is traded already, for instance, in terms of packaging of other goods that you're trading. So all of this, and as well the trade of plastic waste, totaled over $1 trillion over 1 year, representing more than 5% of the global trade in 2018. That's 5% of the total global trade. That was all about plastic. So of course, we have to use these trade mechanisms as well to ensure that they support the transition towards a circular economy, and not the opposite. And it's important, because trade happens globally, virtually all of the countries import plastic in some form or another. Many countries are also exporters of plastic in different forms. So this requires that there is an international approach. And again, this goes back to the discussion on the treaty that will kick off at the end of this month. And finally, just getting to the summary now, but it's important as well to note that with all of these strategies, with applying these 4 strategic goals, we're not asking to stop the economy. On the contrary, with these solutions that we know today, these are not solutions that still need to be invented. With these solutions, we can already address the majority of the problem. And we have a credible path forward to reduce 80% of the plastic pollution by 2040, compared to the plastic pollution that we expect would be in 2040 if we do nothing. And this reduction goes as well with a significant reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. It goes as well with the net creation of jobs, and the majority of jobs would be created in low and middle income countries. And there's also net savings for the government expenditure that would happen if we do nothing. And this, it's important as well to note that the jobs creation, the savings, happen in a very unevenly distributed way across the world. So jobs, as I said, would be mainly created in low and middle income countries. There would be job destruction in some parts of the economy, but the net increase would be, it's this calculated 700,000 jobs, which would happen mainly in low and middle income countries. The net savings mainly, on the other hand, could happen in higher income countries, because they would have a much lower bill on waste management, because there would be less waste to manage. And these are the countries where the bill on waste management is currently bigger. There would be increases in costs in other countries, particularly lower and middle income countries, where we would need significant investments in the future. So now, yes, to finish it off, just as a reminder of the summary of what we've been seeing. So I think there's no opposition. It's quite clear. The evidence is there of this massive increase in plastic production, the associated increase as well in plastic pollution, and the links of plastic pollution to human health and environmental health. We see many types of impacts. So this is not just about the direct impact of a plastic bottle that is, perhaps choking a sea turtle. We have impacts that range from climate change to ozone depletion, toxicity, and definitely, of course, direct impacts on species. We also see, and this is quite clearly demonstrable by science, that the root cause of all of this is the linear economy of plastics. this take, make, waste economy is what's really causing the problem of plastic pollution. We've also seen the importance of the social aspect. So it's not just impacts and environmental impacts or human health impacts. There's also socioeconomic impacts of many different types. And then we see then circularity as one part of the solution that requires to be applied in an integrated way. We cannot cherry pick one specific solution or another. We need to apply them all in order to shift the systems towards circularity. And for this, we will need certainly international agreements, legal obligations. In summary, just to be positive, systems change is possible. We can really change the system, but we need this global vision, we need monitoring and reporting, and we need to act now. I'll leave it at that. And I see also Darren has already put the camera, so it probably means that I completely overstepped my time, and apologies for that, but hopefully there's still time for some questions. Thanks.
No, it's good. Thank you very much, Lawrence. And also to Brenda, yes, we do have time right now for a few questions before we move on to our panel segment in the second half. I'll just quickly share my screen. I do have a couple of questions for the speakers, but we also do have some questions in the chat space, and so I'd like to maybe go to that first. And I guess the first question that was posed, and maybe either Brenda or Lawrence or both could react to this, but there was a question about the in terms of the I guess the cycle, there's about the wide usage of synthetics like polyesters in the textile sector. How does that sort of factor into that whole, I guess, the diagram and the flows that you had described, Lawrence?
So yeah, if the question is about the polyester, I mean, textile is one of the big sectors using plastics. In fact, 60% approximately of the textiles that we use are synthetic. Synthetic textiles are essentially plastics, and polyester is one of these. Probably one of the biggest types. How do they factor in this? Well, textile sector is a big part of the consumption of plastics. The textile sector is also being presented sometimes as, well, we can actually put a lot of recycled plastics in textiles, which is true, it's happening. I mean, polyester, you get that as well, for instance, from PET bottles, the transparent bottles that are so common in drinks. This can be recycled into fibers that are used in polyester, and then you can say, well, I have a recycled fleece. I don't see this very much as a part of the solution. I mean, of course, it's something that we have to look into. The issue, however, is that if you have a big problem with the drinks sector that is generating a huge consumption of plastic, and it's generating a huge waste of plastic, putting that plastic into textile is not solving the problem of the drink sector. The drink sector should not be using single-use plastic products in the first place. We can use reusable products there. They could be plastic, they could be glass, they could be metal, but if they are reusable and they stay in the economy, that's what we want. So we massively decrease this influx of fossil fuels that go into the plastics economy. Sorry, that I was being a bit prescriptive there, but hopefully that provides a bit of the context on the textile side of things.
Yes, no, extremely helpful. Thank you, Lawrence. I do see in the chat space, we did have some exchange about the issues of bioplastics, and I see that Brenda has responded to that in the chat space. So I encourage participants to take a look at that. And thanks, Vladan, for that. Also, I wanted to ask Brenda, I guess, a question regarding, I guess, what role that national action plans could play in the whole process here of addressing plastics in the circular economy. And if you might be able to elaborate on that just briefly, as well as, I mean, how can we build on other ongoing processes that are already in place?
Thanks, Darren. It's a good question because I think that's a key question. How are countries going to implement a future agreement, and what will the approach be? Within the resolution itself, there is reference to national action plans as a possibility in the provisions for the future instrument. So I think there is some indication that that is the direction that the action plans will go. I think we've seen lots of different approaches to action plans over the years as well. And in terms of the Minamata action plans for mercury for artisanal and small scale gold mining, countries actually have to specify whether they have a problem in their country with it, and they have to then acknowledge that and then develop a national action plan specifically linked to that. Or other approaches are, a universal requirement for them. So I think we have a lot to learn from other areas. There are other linked areas as well. And I think that's why work at the national level is quite important to understand from people's experiences with national action plans, what are most effective approaches, what are paper desk exercises. And, I don't have a full answer, but I think we will expect to see national action plans in this process to some degree, and the level of which they will be responsible for national level implementation is still to be determined. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brenda. I do have a question for the participants based on all the information that was presented so far. So we're going to move quickly to a poll question on the screen. So back to the Slido. This poll should now appear on your Slido app on your mobile phone or in your internet browser. But if not, you can rescan the barcode or go to slido.com and type in IBC green. The question here we're posing to all the participants is, which of the following strategic goals can help guide the transition to a circular economy for plastics? And just select all that you think are applicable in this. And I think for those you'll want to, I guess, think back to Lawrence's presentation. While participants are looking at this particular question, Lawrence, I was struck by one of your slides that was talking about the packaging, I guess the packaging sector, and how that is a really quite a key lever for making improvement in addressing the circular economy in plastics. I'm wondering if you might be able to elaborate briefly, I guess, maybe on, the action side of things, and also are there sort of connections with other existing processes that can help really pull that lever, I guess, for change on the packaging side?
Yeah, that's a very useful one. Thanks, Aaron. So on the packaging, I would highlight that there's indeed, so packaging industry is in a very interesting spot, I would say. They are, and there's no other way of putting it. I mean, they are the main culprits of the plastic pollution that we see out there. At the same time, they are not married to plastic, if you want. So the brands that are putting plastic pollution in the environment, actually what they want to do is that they want to sell their products. They are not interested in the type of packaging, but of course they've been using plastic because it's been super cheap and very versatile, etc., etc. But now they are also among those that are wanting to move faster into solving this problem, mainly because their name is in the pollution. So this is branded litter we're talking about. One of the initiatives that I would like to highlight is the New Plastics Economy Global Commitment, which is led by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in collaboration with UNEP. And in this one, about 20% of the plastic packaging that is globally produced, so the companies responsible for about this 20% of the plastic packaging have been committing to actions to achieve specific targets by 2025. Last week, we just published the 2022 report, which actually shows that after some initial positive trends, we're seeing that, now it's 3 years to 2025. There are many of the targets that are going to be missed almost certainly. So we're putting additional pressure on these companies, but it's also interesting to see that many of the things that they have been trying to do, it's quite obvious that they cannot achieve them on their own. And from a voluntary perspective, there's only so much that you can do. But then unless there is legislation and things which are imposed to the other 80% of the sector, you cannot move that fast, and you cannot move that much. So, essentially, there are good examples, but we're also seeing the limitations of voluntary approaches. So that's where companies are also saying, hey, we want to do more, but unless there's a legislation and governments are pushing everybody else, there's not so much that we can do on our own. So I hope that provides a bit of elements for the answer.
Yes, no, it was helpful elaboration on that, really that key lever in the whole process. So thank you very much, Lawrence, and thank you, Brenda, for sharing all that information. This information will be, of course, this event's being recorded for all participants. To access the slides will be available on the IBC website. We'll talk about that later. Thank you, participants, for participating in the poll right now. I understand there was some issue in selecting multiple options. And indeed, if you've been trying to answer this poll question, you will realize that all of the answers are correct on this. And of course, these are the 4 strategic goals that Lawrence had in his presentation of how to really get traction on circular economy for plastics. So thank you, everybody, for participating in that. And with that, without further ado, Livia, I think I will turn the floor now over to you to set the stage for the panel, introduce our speakers, and we have an excellent second half here for everybody in terms of covering more territory and more depth on the whole plastics issue. So thank you very much, Livia, over to you.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you for the great presentation. So yes, so this part of the event focuses on a panel. We have 4 experts, and as we already said, Matt said that as well. So we are trying to focus on experience sharing. As it was said earlier, there we have the global negotiations, there is the science, there is the need to do something about the challenge of growing plastic pollutions in different forms. And so I'm hoping that our panelists can provide insights on some specific ways how in their context some solution has been adopted, and they can share their experience. I would like to ask kindly all the panelists to please, as much as you can, focus on the sharing of the experience or the practical outputs of your work, so that we can get this other side of the story moving from the legislation to action. We will have 4 panelists, and we will go very much from the point when Lorek left off, from going from the need to do policy frameworks and decision making at the national government level. We'll start with Meram Mudan Arda, who is a project coordinator for chemical and waste. And then we move to sharing experiences around from Asia and Pacific, and there we will have Camila Ernest, who is the coordinator of a SEI circular project at UNEP and UNCT. Then we look at plastic and waste management system from Serbia, a presentation by Vladan Šćekić, who is a program director at the Environment Improvement Center. And finally, we look at also a very important point that was also mentioned in the previous section about the linkages between plastic and green jobs and circular economy by Yoshiko Kamakura from ILO. We all the presenters have a few slides, so I would like to ask all the presenters to share the screen and use the slides from their computers. I have your slides on my screen as well. In case need to be, I can project it myself. So please go ahead and try to focus on the solutions and kind of the takeaway action messages that we can get from your experience. Thank you. And now over to Meral.
Hello, welcome everyone. First of all, thank you for this very useful webinar and the previous presentations that were really more than interesting. I am going to be more into the depth of the legal and policy framework in Turkey. And I'm going to be broadly mentioning about the legal framework in Turkey, going through the depth of the waste management, but in particular to wherever relevant to plastics waste management. As per Turkey, we are a party to the Bucharest Convention and Barcelona Convention for marine pollution, and we are also a party to the Basel Convention and the particular amendment number 2 for plastic waste export, but we are currently on an exemption. So for the EU framework for waste management, we are having adopted already the Green Deal and Circular Economy Action Plan, Waste Framework Directive on reducing the use of low waste plastic, landfill directive, and the other directives that are mostly relevant to waste management and plastics waste management. When we look into the legal framework in Turkey, that is expected to cover the area of waste management and plastics waste management. Environmental law is sort of regulating the polluter pays principle, reuse, recycle, and recovery, the waste hierarchy that we are always referring to. And we have another law on establishment of an environmental agency in Turkey, which is an independent organization. And it is expected that this agency will be managing deposits for beverage boxes, glasses, packaging materials in 2023. I should mention here that even though you recycle plastic, you cannot use it in sort of food material afterwards, because even though the Ministry of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change allows it, still within the course of the Turkish Food Codex regulation, it is not going to be used again for any sort of food products. So you can only have a more simpler use legally, such as garbage bags from recycled products. So for the zero waste regulation, there has been a zero waste campaign in Turkey that has been trying to manage the separate categories for waste, measures for biodegradable waste, reaching landfills, and time limits for institutions for separate collection system. And we have the packaging waste control regulation as well. And there has been a latest revision to include biodegradable packaging waste definition only, not including all details, what sort of a thing is called as biodegradable packaging material and how it should be done. But still we have a wider definition. And we are having another regulation on recovery contribution share that is going to be basically managing the deposit system. And we have the civic amenity centers communique, which is related to when public community brings in their waste for the municipalities, they need some mobile or permanent amenity centers to bring in and collect wastes. And also, it is regulated the import of control of wastes and the receiving waste from ships and control of waste. And it is currently actually dealing with the waste that is generated in the marine environment, but not the waste that has been created in the terrestrial environment and reaches the marine environment. Unfortunately, that is a gap in the legal framework in Turkey, which is expected to be strengthened. And also, we have the regulation on landfilling of wastes with the aim of reduction of mixed waste to be accepted just like the European Union targets, but 5% less than that. We have the 235 targets as being 60% for the recovered ratio. And also we have the National Waste Management and Action Plan until 2023. And the aim is actually, again, indicated in this one. And coming to the practicalities on the ground, we are working with the Turkish government in order to be trying to cut the sources of plastic waste that is coming from the terrestrial area continuously and trying to support the government for better waste management practices. As you see here, for waste management purposes, for segregation purposes, we have been working with the government of Turkey for 11 zero waste guidelines. Whenever a sector is trying to be installing a waste segregation process, just like the airport, the university, municipality, or a kindergarten, whenever you have such a sector, this is a very detailed guideline of one who doesn't know how to simply segregate their waste could be easily opening it up and then make an installation of a zero waste segregation system for themselves. And this is being accredited by the ministry, and they are provided a basic level zero waste management system. As you know, for legal framework in Turkey, it is quite strong and is mostly in alignment with EU acquis. In 2017, Zero Waste campaign is initiated in Turkey to cover 400,000 buildings to cut down the source of plastic waste and waste that is not properly managed and handled. And for plastic waste management, however, still does not have an emphasis in the overall legal framework, which is actually a target for both the ministry and for UNDP Turkey to support the process of having a more clear, emphasized plastic waste management in this legal framework. Because as you see, the legal framework basically covers the waste management overall, but not the plastics waste management separately. And EU single-use plastics directive is not yet adopted, and Turkish legal framework currently does not cover single-use plastics at all. Turkey's legal framework for waste management does not identify it. And for marine litter, or legal framework does not regulate waste that are originated in terrestrial area, which is very important because all marine litter we see, majority of the marine litter we see is actually coming from the terrestrial areas. They're not actually originated in the marine environment. And also no regulations for plastic nets or no controls over the plastic nets at all. And also for the agricultural plastics too. Waste acceptance from ships also may need a further revision, since currently it's not fully aligned to relevant directive of the European Union yet. And currently Turkey is under the preparations of UNEA 5.2 negotiations, and UNDP Turkey is currently helping the government to prepare some baseline reports for that. So I think I am just within the time boundaries. I'm going to quickly summarize what we are doing in order to be supporting the Turkish government with regards to plastics waste management. We have implemented a community-based recycling project in Kemer. We have tried to identify the factors that are actually keeping people from segregating further. And we have tried to look into the habits and from the habitual development of better segregation. And we have installed waste traps for rivers. In Climate Action in Hatay project, which is a Japan government funded project, we have been working on the zero waste management guidelines and the preparation of baseline reports for Turkey to better understand how they can position itself, how Turkish government can position itself within these negotiations and afterwards, and what needs to be done and when needs to be done. So it's actually towards an action plan for plastics waste management, and for the zero waste management training for kindergarten students and for village headers and for fishing families, in order to be raising awareness and trying to cut the source from the terrestrial area. And also we're providing equipment support for municipalities to better deal with waste. We have also some sort of done a healthcare waste segregation and equipment support again. And we have a good project and in the field of resource efficiency. It's a great tool of Green Deal, I think, that we are dealing with the industrial symbiosis project and trying to decrease the amount of industrial waste that is going to the landfill through this nice tool. And we are also having two pipelines projects for marine litter management and local zero waste management projects. So that is what we are trying to do with the Turkish government, how we are trying to support the government in the area of plastics waste management. So I have the resources in my presentation, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Meran, for the overview of the government actions and the frameworks. Let's go through first all the presentations, and then we will try to have a time for questions. I would like to encourage every participant, if you can type your questions into the chat box so that our panelists can answer them as we go. Also, we will hopefully have a little bit time at the end for questions. So now over to Kamala. on the experience from Central Asia, from Asia and the Pacific. Please. If you can share your slide for a presentation mode.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm trying to enlarge my screen. Can you see my sharing screen?
Yes, we do. But we see the slides on the left as well. But if you...
Okay, so I can.
Yes, that would work. Perfect.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Greetings from Bangkok. My name is Kamala Ernest. I'm the coordinator of Sea Circular Project, which stands for reducing marine litter by addressing the management of plastic value chain in the Southeast Asia region. So I'm also the UNEP UN city member for Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei. So today, my presentation is on the experiences of working with as UN country team, and also how UNEP's work is being informed the common country actions in the Asia Pacific region. So what I'll do is to actually share. Oh, how do I move my slide? Okay. So, yeah. The outline is to share the context of plastic pollution in Asia, and then to share examples of how UN country team is set up in 2 countries, Malaysia and Thailand. And then to give some specific examples of collaboration in addressing plastic pollution that we have done. And lastly, to actually share a UN reform video on addressing plastic pollution in Malaysia. So here's the context. The Asia Pacific region is definitely a hotspot for plastic pollution and marine litter, as it contributes to a total of 49% of the global total of plastics, and contributes also to 38% of the consumption of plastic, and 81% of all plastic waste originating from rivers in the Southeast Asia region. And 75% of material value of recyclable plastics, which is an equivalent of $6 billion, is lost just by first use cycle in 3 countries in Southeast Asia. So it's definitely a plastic crisis in the region. So projects like Sea Circular, which I'm managing in 6 countries, actually supports countries to inspire them with market-based solutions, as well as strengthening science and data for informed decision-making. And through that also, my role as also working in the area of marine litter and plastic pollution, plus being a member of the UN country team, helps me to advance the work of UNEP in the area of marine litter, plastic pollution, and also steer countries towards a better involvement in coming up with this global agreement. So with that, I just would like to show what we have for Malaysia. This is the setup. countries have different setups. So the one for Malaysia, the UN Sustainable Development Country Framework is categorized into 4 different areas. So as you can see, there is an area which focuses on people, then planet, prosperity, and peace. So UNEP is part of the planet group, working group, and which is led by UNDP in Malaysia. And if you see, the focus of the planet group is to achieve the target focus on environment, climate change, and resilience, and it has its set of indicators. However, when you look at plastic pollution, it's not like a dedicated area or a target that is explicitly mentioned in the results framework. So it requires a lot of sort of coordination, collaboration, sharing of information, and awareness raising, continuous awareness raising, while participating in the monthly UN city meetings and supporting the resident coordinators to advance the agenda on addressing plastic pollution. Now, if we look at Thailand, the UN country team is set up quite differently in terms of it looks at 3 different outcomes of the UN country framework. So the first outcome looks at inclusive, green, resilient, low carbon, and sustainable economy. And this is where also UNEP is a co-convener with UNIDO to achieve the targets and objectives of outcome 1. So this is also a different setup, and this framework is very much in line with Thailand's National Action Plan. So what we can see is that also our role to push the agenda on plastic pollution is very much dependent on who are in the group and who are sort of the collaborators who can work together to push the common agenda. I will just move on to the next slide to provide some examples of collaboration. So this is one collaboration we did in Thailand. Through the Sea Circular project, there was this piloting of waste-wise city assessment that we did in 6 cities in the region. And one of it was in Thailand, in the province of Chonburi. So this was carried out last year in terms of coming up with hotspot modeling and also to come up with assessment, city waste assessment for actions for planning to help the city municipality develop integrated waste management system that is inclusive of addressing plastic pollution. If you look at the smallest figure on the site, what we have done is a number of data collection and also to understand the flow of waste at city level and to determine the plastic footprint of the population in that province. From that, through a number of stakeholder consultations and engagements, inputs were provided to the cities to help them come up with better integrated waste management plan. So to elevate this work, what has happened was that 6 months after the project had ended, the UN resident coordinator, if you can see her, she's in the center of the picture, for Thailand, together with UNEP and UN Habitat, who actually helped us implement this project, carried out a site visit to actually the landfill where the waste assessment was being carried out, as well as to have dialogues with the governor of the province and to further engage them and inspire them to implement the recommended measures from this activity. So that generated some media engagement, increased the visibility, and also had some sort of follow-up action and more fundings to the province to improve or follow up from the work that UNEP had carried out with UN Habitat. So here I must say that the UN resident coordinator is a very dynamic person, active and very engaging, and very interested in mobilizing change. So she had actually inspired a lot of work of UNEP as well as other UN agencies with the national government in Thailand. So the next example on how we can improve the work of working with the UN country team and also to support the resident coordinate, empower, so to speak, the resident coordinators, is a pilot that we did in 3 countries on inspiring national level engagement between the UNRCs and the government by raising national level awareness on championing the urgency to beat plastic pollution and also to support national action. So this is funded by the government of Norway, where we had produced 3 videos and country briefs for Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. So I would like to play this video for one of the countries that we have just completed, and it is in a final draft. So I'm going to stop sharing this slide and then share the video slide. If you give me a moment, please. Right. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So let me share this.
The UN Resident Coordinator is the highest-ranking representative of the UN development system at the country level. They lead UN country teams and support the implementation of the 2030 Agenda.
Our mission as UN Resident Coordinators is to lead the UN's engagement and collaboration with local stakeholders in support of national initiatives to combat plastic pollution. It is our responsibility to consider each nation's position when delivering our cooperation framework. Ensuring environmental sustainability and building resilience for all is a top priority in Malaysia. As the UN Resident Coordinator, I look forward to embarking on this inspiring journey in support of all Malaysians.
On the 2nd of March 2022, UN member states endorsed an historic resolution to end plastic pollution and forge an international legally binding agreement by 2024.
Malaysia is a strong proponent of beating plastic pollution. The scope and target of this new agreement must stay focused on the context of addressing plastic pollution with a clear and targeted approach.
Now is the time to roll up our sleeves. Now is the time to get to work because the world is watching.
Thank you.
All right.
Many thanks, Kamala. So let's move to the next presentation by Vladan, and then hopefully after the presentation on green jobs by Yasuhiko, we will have a little bit time for questions. So let's go to Vladan, and yeah, please try to keep the time limit, just as a reminder. Thank you. So Vladan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me and having me in this webinar. This is a very interesting opportunity for us to learn more about plastics from around the world and to present what we have been doing in the previous period. So I would like to start first by letting you know that I am the program director of the Environment Improvement Center, an NGO based in Belgrade, Serbia. For you who don't know where that is, it's in the southeastern Europe or on the Balkans. And if you ever met somebody from Serbia, you have already learned that in tough and difficult situations and topics, we like to use lots of humor to overcome it. So this is one of the topics that we feel it's really difficult. So I will start with the story of a guy that came from Western Europe to Serbia to live. And on the platform Reddit, he asked the people, how do we deal with our waste? How do we separate different bags, bins, and everything? And this is the answer that came up, and really is a sentiment of how we feel actually in Serbia and how the work is done in Serbia. So I will read it here. In Serbia, we hold the belief that all trash is created equal to be a self-evident truth. There shall be no discrimination between trash of any kind based on its chemical composition, color, smell, or state. So that is something that we feel that our waste management system kind of works like that, or it doesn't work as it should be. I was asked to have just a small part of presentation regarding the legislation overview in Serbia and legislation framework. So the situation is pretty much the same like Meral already mentioned in Turkey. So we have laws, plans, strategies, programs, and everything. More or less, they are in line with the European legislation, since Serbia is a candidate country, and we need to transpose the EU acquis in our legislation, but it's a bit outdated. So, for example, we don't have EU directive on single-use plastics adopted or transposed or anything. We are still waiting for it. As you can see in this slide, we have some national goals from plastics, and since I come from an NGO, I would say this is not ambitious enough, and I think we can all agree on that. According to the Serbian Environmental Protection Agency, 33.8% of the plastics that was put on the market was collected in that year, which we feel is an overestimate, because even from the Ministry of the Environment Protection, they said that they are having issues with the data because they don't get reliable data. It's their numbers are way higher than it's been recorded. So this is one of the issues that really raises many questions. But let's move forward. We have also law on packaging and packaging waste. There are two ways that companies are dealing with the waste. They do self-management, but then they have to get the license, or they delegate the work of plastic collections or waste collection to the operator companies. There are 7 companies in Serbia dealing with that issue. When it comes to the composition of waste, plastic is around 12% of the communal waste in Serbia, and the projected amount of waste that we generate each day is around 1.2 kilograms. Right now, at 2030, it's projected to be 1.4 kilograms, which means that every day we produce around 150 grams of plastic. For 7 million people living in Serbia, you can get the idea how large that number is, and it's just when we talk about the citizens, not the industry. What we've been analyzing, since we had a situation that in the previous 6 months we didn't have a government, so we were working on this issue of plastic and to prepare something for the new government when to be formed, to present them with something that we would like to have in the next period. And what we've seen that the main constraints are there is a lack of data, correct data on waste generation. We haven't still made any progress towards introducing deposit refund scheme in Serbia. We still use plastic bags that are having OXO additives in them. For those who don't know, OXO additives are banned in the European Union on July 3rd, 2021. And we are working on it to do it here in Serbia as well. We have inadequate infrastructure for plastic waste, or in general for waste collection, separated waste, to be more specific, because we have integral approach to waste collection, and we have lack of capacities on all levels, from the ministries to the inspections. So when we put everything in one place, it was clear call to action that something needs to be done, and that's what we decided to do. What we've decided to do is several things. First thing was social research. We've done the research with the citizens to see their knowledge, their habits and attitudes towards the plastic, with focus on single-use plastics. We've held consultative meetings with companies that are putting plastic on the market. So there's many types of companies involved in this process and in its life cycle of plastic. We've developed a position paper that was based on these first two things, and the advocacy campaign that follows that, and the social media campaign, since we've articulated some of the issues within the social research where we've seen intervention points to be made and to educate and inform the citizens even better about the issue of plastic and single-use plastic. So the social research shown us that almost 100% of the respondents believe that using single-use plastic is the problem for the environment and for human health. We are aware that these researches are limited due to the fact that we have 1,014 respondents and it's been done totally online. But when you see these type of high numbers, we can all agree that they are really high. Maybe not in this percent, but the issue is there, present, and people are aware of it. So when we ask them what are the main problems for them regarding the plastics, microplastics in food chain, long period of decomposition and impact on human health were first three things, but they've also stated some other things, but in general, they are aware pretty much about the problems that plastic is causing in everyday life. Three most common types of plastics that can be found, single-use plastics that can be found in households are PET bottles, plastic bags, and these lightweight boxes for measuring groceries when you buy cheese or something like that. In Serbia, it's pretty much used in every retailer store for these measuring groceries. And also 57% of the respondents know that the plastic bags that are being sold in Serbia are not biodegradable, because through the legislation, the oxo-degradable bags are being presented as biodegradable bags, and that's one of the big issues that we are fighting with and trying to change that, because the fact is, and many researchers have shown that oxo-degradable plastics is even worse than these usual plastics, let's say, and this is something that we are really trying to change, also due to the fact that all the companies producing plastic bags in Serbia with oxo-degradable additives are not paying for the environmental taxes that they should, and the budget of the Republic of Serbia loses around 2 million euros. And those data are the data from the bags, plastic bag producers. So if they're pretty sure about that amount, that seems also like an important intervention point in, well, in different terms anyway. Also, 95% of respondents supported the introduction of the deposit refund scheme. This is something that we feel it's really important issue. And when concluded our research, the citizens need more disposal units for plastics. This was being also pointed out as an issue. In Belgrade, Serbia, which is the capital city, it's around 50% of the people said that they have no bins for separating plastics. But outside of Belgrade, the situation is around 3 times worse. So that's one big issue. Of course, introduction of DRS, of deposit refund scheme, is also something they want. They want ban on single-use plastics in general and plastic bags, more stricter penalties and taxes also for disposing of plastic and for producing and putting it in market. And something that we came across is that they want to trust more in the waste management system. Something we came across actually was a repetitive answer that they are putting all our separated plastics and other waste into the same truck, and they're taking it like that to the landfill. So they don't believe that these materials are being recycled actually, but just dumped at the landfill. The second step was to have consultative meetings with plastic producers in Serbia, or anyone who puts plastic on the market. We had multi-stakeholder meeting with around, not around, but with exactly 25 representatives. Those are the companies that produce plastic, beverage, retail chains, recyclers, and other waste operators. Also professional associations like Serbian Business Chamber, Plastic Producers Association. We also talked to representatives from academia and NGOs and activists. Through these consultative meetings, we came across the following conclusions: that transposition and application of EU single-use plastic directives is necessary and expected to be done. It is also expected to have as soon as possible introduction of the deposit refund scheme, because when all the laws and bylaws are adopted, the system needs around 3 to 4 years to be implemented. So we are hardly looking at 2030 to have this thing done by then. What industry also asked is ban on oxo additives. So they are aware, and they are working towards being in line with the EU single-use plastics directive, and they asked our government also to do the same. And also we've heard that the ban of plastic bags between 15 and 50 microns, which are these medium thickness bags, are the biggest issue. So we're trying to work on that as well. Taxes that are being gathered for the environmental issues, and different types of taxes that are within this sector need to be reinvested back to the sector, so we can reduce the impact and help the producers to become more sustainable and to use more sustainable materials. And of course, what we want is more ambitious targets for collection and recycling of plastic waste. So when combined, these two groups of stakeholders, actually citizens and stakeholders, we've created a position paper, and most of them have fully agreed with what we've done. We've also made some space for the companies to have their additional opinions expressed, because our main goal is to present to the government the things that are in public sphere. So what is the benefit for the public, not for the companies, but we've tried to make everyone agree on this, not to make, but to produce a text that everyone will support. So in general, we've produced position paper with 9 intervention points, and so far we have gathered 33 supporters. I will just quickly go through this position paper. It's a formation of working group in a permanent session at the government level, with participation of relevant stakeholders, prohibition of the use of oxo additives, prescribing a ban for placing plastic bags between 15 and 50 microns, prescribing a deadline for this introduction of the deposit return scheme, adopting the waste prevention program. So we're not just dealing with the issue of the post-consumer waste, but also how to reduce generation of the waste itself, prescribing national goals that are in line for collection and recycling, that are in line with the EU single-use plastics directive. And of course, we asked to have a mandatory percentage of recycled content in the new produced bottles, also in line with the EU SUP directive. More fees on plastic and other packaging that is going to be disposed in landfills instead of being collected and recycled. And all the funds collected on the basis of environmental protection fees to be returned to the industry or reinvested to the industry, and to improve professional capacities at all levels of the government, including inspection, because we are seeing that there is a lack of inspection capacities and inspection itself done at a number of these companies. We've already heard that the data is an issue. So there are a number of things that these capacities have to be improved, so we can have a system a bit more controlled and more efficient and effective.
Sorry. Thank you so much. I think we have to move on. to the last presentations, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to pose a question to the chat about what the countries, based on your experience, all of the presenters in the panel, what countries can do in terms of opportunities or low-hanging fruits that they can manage the issue of pollution.
Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing the experience. So I'll put the question into chat, and let's move to Yasuhiko about the green jobs related issue. And I would like to kindly ask all the presenters if they can just put what the countries can do, what are the low-hanging fruits from a country's point of view to advance managing plastics and energy, as talked about the complexity of the problem in the country level. Please, Yasuhiko, floor is yours.
Hi. Well, I think our ILO answer is a collaboration in the UN system, all about it. And let me starting thank you very much for this giving the opportunity to speak today. And I'm sorry to one question raised in the earlier panel, a discussion about the textile industry. We ILO deal with social justice in the world working place. And we have several instruments, and particularly for textile, we have a code of practice on safety, health in the textile, clothing, leather, and footwear industries, which address how to promote, prevent the environment and how to promote circularity and the environment protection. So I will share the web link later. So, okay. In the next few minutes, I'd like to talk about the decent work and the plastic circularity. First, I'd like to start with talking about social and labor issue in the plastic recycling sector. Second, I'd like to touch on the potential for decent job creation in the sector. Third, I will outline the ILO policy framework and the tool to address the social and labor issues in the sector. Sorry about it. So why does the plastic circularity matter? Because we are concerned about inequality. We had that study show that only 10% of plastic waste are recycled. In addition, another study showed that the 22 million tons of plastics leaked into the environment every year. In many countries, the municipalities are responsible for waste management and plastic recycling. However, not all plastics can be recycled. Leaked plastics are collected by informal waste and recycling workers. Their role is significant around the world. In some communities, these workers provide the only form of municipal waste collection and recycling. The informal waste and recycling workers as a vulnerable population. They are often found in low-income countries. They are rural workers, people living in poverty, migrant, refugee, single parent, people with disability, and other disadvantaged group of people. These workers suffer from poor working conditions. They also lack access to public social security systems, schemes such as the healthcare, unemployment insurance, individual retirement account, and the pension plans. We call this inhumane situation a decent work deficit. So I just can't see that, right? So how does the ILO address the decent work deficit? Our response can be summed up as a just transition. A just transition means green the economy in a way that is fair and inclusive as possible to everyone concerned, creating decent work opportunity and leaving no one behind. just transition involves maximum social and economic opportunities of climate action, while minimize and carefully managing any challenges, including through effective social dialogue among all groups impacted, and the respect for the ILO International Labour Standard. In September 21, the UN Secretary General launched the Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection for Just Transition, with the ambition to bring together member states and stakeholders to help countries to create 400 million decent jobs. The ILO 2018 report, Greening with Jobs, has estimated that 8 million new jobs could be created by 2030 in a circular economy model. The ILO conducted national green job assessment. Although we do not have a green job assessment focused solely on plastic recycling, our national green job assessment showed that a large number of green jobs could be created in the waste management sector. For example, our assessment for Bangladesh reported that over 200,000 jobs could be created in the sector. Another assessment in Malaysia reported that nearly 16,000 green jobs could be created in the sector. A key message of this assessment is that the holistic approach would have a larger job creation impact. In other words, if we develop a solution throughout the supply chain of plastics, we could create a huge impact on the ground. So we have our system and a set of instruments to assist the implementation with just transition. At the country level, we have a decent work country programs. DWCP has been established as a main vehicle for delivering of ILO support to countries. Tribalism and social dialogue are central to the planning and implementation of a coherent and integrated ILO program program of assistance to tripartite constituents in the country. In the Eastern Central Asian region, we have 8 DWCP in Armenia, North Macedonia, Moldova, Russian Federation, Serbia, Tajikistan, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. International labor standards have grown into a comprehensive system of instruments on work and social policy, backed by a supervisory system designed to address all sorts of issues in their application at the national level. International labor standards are minimum standard in the world work. In this regard, ILO Declaration of Fundamental Principles on Right at Work is particularly important. The declaration set out the 5 basic human rights in the world work. These rights are freedom of association and the effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining, the elimination of all forms of forced labor, the effective abolition of child labor, the elimination of any discrimination in respect of employment and occupation, and a safety health working environment. ILO Just Transition Guidelines offer a comprehensive set of policies. The guideline put into the place macroeconomic and growth policies, labor market policies, industrial and sectoral policies, enterprise policy, and policy on skill development, rights, social protection, and occupational safety health. The guideline underlined the importance of policy coherence and the effective social dialogue and tripartitism. To facilitate the implementation of guideline, we provide the technical advisory service to member states through a manual, research, and the green job assessment. In addition, we have a training arm which offers a handful of green job training courses. In summary, just transition can create a decent work in the plastic recycling sector. To this end, a systemic approach is required to implement it through social dialogue involving government, employers, and workers' organizations at all levels. In this regard, I don't think that all organizations in the UN system must strengthen collaboration on sharing knowledge, experience, and good practice on a full recycling of plastics, enabling us to achieve SDG 8 and 13. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And thank you also for being considerate of the time. We started a brief chat in the Zoom chat where we already get a very interesting answer from Meral and also from Kamala about what governments can do to advance the management of plastic or reduction of plastic. So please, if you like, Yasuhiko, please feel free to write also your response. We also have the response from Vladan. And I'm sorry we didn't have time for a discussion, but at least we get your written answers, which we can include in the guidance note. And with this, I'll thank you for your participation. I apologize that we ran over time. And now I am handing over to Francesca or Darren.
I'll just do a quick little reminder to participants here before handing over to Francesca to close. Thank you everyone for the participation in the chat space in Zoom. And just to note, and thank you also for the contributions to the virtual discussion board on Padlet that you had the link to. This discussion board will remain open for the next several days. So I encourage you, colleagues from the country team offices and RCOs, if you do have thoughts on the types of supports you need for programming and strategic planning at the national level, feel free to add your points in here as well, and we'll be able to include that as part of the summary for the actual report itself. So thank you very much for that. And so now with that, I think I'll over to you, Francesca, to I guess give some closing remarks.
Thank you, Darren. To all the participants, we are really very grateful from the IBC on Environment and Climate Change for your participation in this training. It's a core action of the issue-based coalition toolbox. A big thanks to all the speakers today, to Brenda, to Lawrence, to Meral, to Kamal, to Vladan, and to Yasuhiko, for setting the scenes, for sharing your experiences on the ground with us on addressing plastics. Thanks to the IISSD facilitators, a big thank for this work of today and past webinars, and for the IBC team behind the webinar. You saw from the discussion today, it is necessary not only to address how plastic affects the environment, cause pollution to both the terrestrial and the marine ecosystems, and how it impacts human health, but we need also to reflect how we need to do the shift to a circular economy, and how can this create a positive results in terms of both reducing waste, but also creating new green jobs. You heard from the discussion, there is a big environmental challenge for our countries and for the world in general, and we are facing it today, and it's increasing. There is a complex life cycle, complex waste management system behind this massive amount of plastic we generate every day. And with the polls, we give you some statistics hourly rate. As the UN, we have particular responsibility in our work on sustainable development goals to assist countries in shifting the gears towards a more sustainable development and moving to less, or let's say better, plastic dependent society. And as country teams, you are uniquely placed to support such transition. Going forward with a new treaty that Brenda discussed today, being negotiated, the UN's engagement to support governments in the implementation will be particularly important. Therefore, we encourage you to use the guidance material and the information from today's discussion. The issue-based coalition on environment and climate change for Europe and Central Asia is a team of 19 agencies, strong, and it's available to help you, to support and provide informations that are needed. As Darren mentioned, the discussion board will remain open for a few days. You can continue to exchange there and provide informations and advices. This event has been recorded. All the material will be soon available in a new webpage of the Issue-Based Coalition on Environment and Climate Change, which is hosted in the Regional Collaborative Platform website. And my colleague will be passing the link in the chat right now. We encourage you, therefore, to further circulate this information. As Darren mentioned, your feedback today on the webinar and how it met your expectations will be very useful and helpful in us in preparing the last webinar of this Green Transition Program. It will be dedicated on enabling policies and strategic frameworks. And so please do fill in the feedback form. And talking of the next and last webinar, as it was announced at the start of this event, it will be on the 29th of November at the same time slot. It will focus on presenting some elements of a strategic approach to support the green transition and how green transition is taking place in countries of Central Asia, Eastern Europe, and the Caucasus, and Southeastern Europe. At the webinar, you will hear experiences from different UN country teams on their support to host the governments to advance the green transition. Furthermore, we will discuss and explore collectively what could be a strategic role of the UN country teams in promoting and supporting the green transition. This will be our last webinar, concluding the Green Transition Training Program, so please do join us on the 29th of November. I thank you again for the continued support to the IBC, which is an essential element of our delivery at the country level. Thank you, goodbye.